My child, do not move past these words too quickly, because there are moments when a message arrives not to frighten you, but to place a gentle hand upon your heart before something important changes. Pause here for a little while. There is something beneath the silence around you that you have not fully seen yet, something your soul may already have felt in quiet flashes, in sudden memories, in those strange moments when a certain person enters your mind without warning. What you are about to hear is not meant to fill you with fear. It is meant to reveal what has been hidden behind distance, hesitation, and the words someone has been unable to say. Your soulmate has been thinking about saying goodbye, but the truth behind that thought is far more complicated than it first appears, because this is not the story of someone who suddenly stopped caring. This is the story of someone who may be feeling so much that they no longer know how to carry it. There has been a private battle taking place inside their heart, and very few people around them would ever suspect it. On the outside, they may seem normal. They may continue their routine, answer people politely, laugh when expected, keep themselves occupied, and behave as though nothing unusual is happening. Yet when the noise fades and they are left alone with their thoughts, something changes. Their mind circles back to you. They remember conversations, expressions, moments that seemed small at the time but now feel enormous. They replay what they should have said. They wonder whether they waited too long. They question whether you still feel anything at all. And somewhere between hope and exhaustion, a thought has begun appearing that they never wanted to entertain. Perhaps they should step away before their heart becomes even more attached to what they are afraid they may never have. But listen carefully, because this is where appearances become misleading. Their thoughts about goodbye are not necessarily coming from the absence of love. In this story, they are coming from the fear that love may not be enough if they continue hiding behind silence. There are emotions they have kept protected for longer than you realize. They may have convinced themselves that there would always be another opportunity, another day, another opening, another perfect moment to finally speak honestly. But perfect moments rarely announce themselves. Time moved. Circumstances changed. Unspoken feelings became heavier. And now your soulmate is beginning to understand that silence has consequences too. There was a moment recently when something shifted inside them. It may not have looked dramatic from the outside. There may have been no argument, no grand announcement, no obvious sign. It could have been as simple as hearing your name, seeing something that reminded them of you, noticing the absence of a message they secretly hoped would arrive, or imagining what life would look like if you truly moved on without them. That single thought opened a door they had been trying to keep closed. For the first time, they allowed themselves to picture a future where your connection became nothing more than a memory, and instead of bringing relief, the image unsettled them deeply. They realized that saying goodbye would not erase what they feel. It would simply force them to carry those feelings somewhere you could no longer see them. And that realization frightened them more than they expected. My child, there are certain kinds of distance that are easy to explain. Sometimes people separate because love fades. Sometimes lives move in different directions. Sometimes two hearts honestly discover that they are no longer meant to walk beside one another. But there are also distances created by fear, pride, uncertainty, timing, misunderstanding, and the dangerous assumption that the other person somehow already knows what was never actually spoken. Your soulmate has been standing inside that kind of distance. They have been trying to read your heart without asking you what is inside it. They have been interpreting silence, remembering old moments, studying your energy, and constructing answers from fragments. And fragments can tell the wrong story. There is something they believe about you that may not be completely true. This is important. Your soulmate has been wondering whether you have already emotionally released them. They may believe you have become stronger without them, happier without them, perhaps even indifferent to whatever once existed between you. If you have been quiet, guarded, busy, or simply protecting your peace, they may have interpreted that differently. Where you intended dignity, they may have seen detachment. Where you intended patience, they may have seen disinterest. Where you were waiting for clarity, they may have assumed you were closing the door. And because they did not know how to ask, the uncertainty grew. There were nights when they almost reached toward you in some form. Maybe only in imagination. Maybe they opened a conversation and closed it again. Maybe they rehearsed words they never sent. Maybe they told themselves that tomorrow would be easier. But each time they hesitated, the emotional distance seemed to grow larger in their mind. Eventually they began telling themselves something painful. If they wanted me in their life, surely I would know. Yet another voice inside them kept answering, but what if they are waiting too? That question has not left them. It is one of the reasons goodbye has not happened yet. There is still something holding them at the edge. The part of them that wants to walk away is exhausted by uncertainty. The part of them that wants to stay is still remembering something precious that happened between you, something they cannot reduce to coincidence or forgetfulness. There was a moment when they felt seen by you in a way they rarely experience. Perhaps you listened when everyone else offered opinions. Perhaps you understood something they never fully explained. Perhaps your presence gave them a strange feeling of familiarity, as though your soul had entered the room before your words did. Whatever it was, they have tried to dismiss it, rationalize it, and move forward, yet it keeps returning. That memory has become a quiet obstacle to goodbye. Every time they think, I should let this go, another part of them remembers why letting go feels unnatural. And there is something else. They have not told everyone what they truly feel about you. Some people around them may know pieces of the story, but not the whole truth. They may have described you casually when their feelings were anything but casual. They may have pretended that your absence does not affect them. They may even have acted frustrated or indifferent because admitting tenderness would have made them feel exposed. But recently, someone close to them noticed the contradiction. Someone noticed how quickly their expression changed when your name or a related subject appeared. Someone saw that beneath the words, "I'm fine," there was a much more complicated reality. A question was asked. Your soulmate tried to avoid it. The question came again. And eventually, something slipped out. Not everything. But enough. Enough for the person listening to realize that this connection has been living much deeper inside your soulmate than they have admitted. What happened next surprised them. Instead of being told to forget you, they were challenged to be honest with themselves. They were asked something simple: if you truly want to say goodbye, why does the thought of never speaking to them again hurt you this much? Your soulmate had no immediate answer. Because that question touched the exact place they had been avoiding. Sometimes the truth does not arrive as thunder. Sometimes it arrives through one sentence that removes every excuse. They have been thinking about that sentence ever since. And slowly, another truth has begun to surface. They are not only afraid of losing you. They are afraid of discovering that they could have had something meaningful with you if they had simply been brave enough to communicate. That possibility weighs heavily on them. They can imagine surviving heartbreak. They are less certain they could peacefully live with regret. There is a difference. Pain says, "I tried and it did not work." Regret whispers, "I never truly tried." Your soulmate is beginning to understand which one frightens them more. This is why their inner world feels so unsettled. 1 hour they may convince themselves to move on. The next hour they are remembering you again. One moment they imagine closing the chapter. The next moment they are wondering whether the chapter ever truly began. One part of them wants certainty immediately. Another part knows that matters of the heart rarely unfold according to a neat schedule. And heaven, within this fictional story, seems to be drawing attention not to whether you can control what they decide, but to what this situation is awakening inside both of you. Because there is something changing inside you too. You may have spent so much time wondering what they feel that you have not asked yourself the deeper question: what do you genuinely want now? Not what you wanted months ago. Not what you hoped they would become. Not what loneliness, nostalgia, or imagination wants. What does your present heart truly desire? That question matters because your soulmate is moving toward a crossroads, and if the path between you ever opens again, the connection cannot survive on assumptions alone. Something would have to become more honest. More mature. More grounded. More real. The old pattern of waiting, wondering, interpreting, and silently hoping cannot continue forever. If something meaningful is meant to grow between two people, eventually truth must replace guessing. Boundaries must replace confusion. Consistency must replace emotional disappearing. Courage must replace endless hesitation. Your soulmate is starting to understand this. And perhaps that is the biggest reason goodbye has entered their mind. They know they cannot remain in the middle forever. The middle is where emotions become exhausted. Neither together nor completely apart. Neither speaking honestly nor fully releasing. Neither choosing the connection nor choosing peace. That uncertain place can feel strangely safe at first because nothing definitive has to happen there. But after enough time, uncertainty becomes its own kind of answer. Your soulmate feels that pressure now. They know some decision is coming. But there is one detail they have not yet understood, and when they do, everything may shift. You see, they have been assuming that the emotional story belongs mostly to them. They imagine themselves as the one carrying unanswered questions, the one secretly revisiting the past, the one wondering what might have been. They do not fully understand the things you have carried quietly too. They do not know every moment you almost spoke. They do not know every time you chose silence because you were afraid of being misunderstood. They do not know the occasions when you wanted reassurance but refused to chase it. They do not know how many questions you had to answer alone because they never gave you enough clarity to ask them directly. They may think your silence means you felt less. But sometimes silence comes from feeling too much without knowing whether the other heart is safe enough to receive it. This is the part of the story they have not seen. And somehow, something is about to make them see it differently. There is a conversation approaching in their life. It may come through someone they trust, through an unexpected memory, through something they discover, or through a quiet moment of self-honesty. Whatever form it takes, it is going to confront them with one uncomfortable possibility: perhaps they judged your heart using incomplete evidence. That possibility is already beginning to trouble them. Because if they were wrong about you, then goodbye suddenly becomes a very different decision. Imagine believing someone had stopped caring, only to discover that they were protecting themselves. Imagine believing someone had forgotten you, only to discover that they had simply stopped begging to be understood. Imagine believing the door was closed, only to realize nobody had ever actually tested the handle. This is the emotional threshold your soulmate is approaching. And once they cross it, they will have to face themselves honestly. Not you. Themselves. They will have to ask why they expected certainty while offering confusion. They will have to examine why fear was allowed to speak louder than affection. They will have to recognize where pride protected them from rejection but also prevented intimacy. They will have to decide whether keeping their heart safe has become more important than letting their heart live. That will not be an easy realization. But it may be necessary. Because something about you has already changed them more than they wanted to admit. There was a time when they believed they could simply replace the feeling. Stay busy. Meet different people. Focus elsewhere. Convince themselves that strong connections happen all the time. But the more they tried to reduce what they felt, the more they noticed its uniqueness. It was not constant intensity that made it unique. It was recognition. A strange sense that you reached emotional places in them that others did not easily reach. A feeling that certain conversations carried more weight. A sense that your approval mattered more than it logically should. A tenderness they could not comfortably explain. That is why goodbye feels heavier than a normal ending. They are not merely considering leaving a person behind. They are confronting the possibility of leaving behind a version of themselves that only seemed to appear around you. And they do not yet know whether they are ready to lose that version. There is a softer side of them connected to you. A more vulnerable side. A more hopeful side. A side that imagined possibility beyond what they usually allow themselves to imagine. Even if nothing between you has unfolded perfectly, your presence became associated with something they secretly wanted to believe in. Perhaps that is why they sometimes pulled away. People do not always run from what means nothing. Sometimes they retreat from what means too much. The deeper the possibility, the greater the perceived risk. If they admitted your importance, they would also have to admit your ability to hurt them. So they chose control. Distance feels like control. Silence feels like control. Pretending not to care feels like control. But the heart has never been particularly respectful of control. It kept returning to you. Now they are tired. Not tired of you. Tired of the battle inside themselves. And in that exhaustion, goodbye began to look like peace. But they are beginning to realize that leaving without truth may not create peace at all. It may simply create a quieter form of longing. My child, there is another layer that must be revealed now, because the decision they are considering is connected to something they heard recently. Something was said about relationships, timing, or missed opportunities, and although it may not have been directed at them, it struck them deeply. They heard a story about someone who waited too long. Someone who assumed there would always be another chance. Someone who let pride, circumstances, or fear delay a truth until the opportunity disappeared. Your soulmate listened differently than everyone else. Because while others heard a story, they saw you. For a moment, they imagined years passing. They imagined accidentally hearing that you had built a life with someone else. They imagined smiling politely while something inside them collapsed quietly. They imagined wondering forever whether one honest conversation could have changed everything. That image followed them home. They tried to distract themselves. It stayed. They slept. It returned the next morning. And for the first time, goodbye no longer looked like strength. It looked like surrender. This created a new conflict inside them. If they stay silent, they may protect themselves from immediate rejection. If they speak, they risk hearing something they fear. But if they leave without speaking, they may never know. That last possibility has become unbearable. And something is beginning to form inside their mind. A message. Not necessarily the exact words yet. But the beginning of one. They have imagined how they would start. They have imagined whether they should sound casual or honest. They have deleted sentences in their mind before ever writing them. They have wondered whether saying too much would scare you. They have wondered whether saying too little would repeat the same mistake. And there is one sentence they keep returning to. A sentence they have not yet found the courage to say. It is not, goodbye. That is what makes this moment so important. The word they thought they were preparing to give you may not be the word their heart actually wants to give. They are starting to realize that before goodbye can be honest, another truth must come first. And they have been hiding that truth even from themselves. There is something they need you to know about why they disappeared emotionally at certain moments, why they seemed inconsistent, why they may have acted as though the connection mattered less than it did. It was not simply confusion. There was a specific fear behind it. A fear tied to something from their past. Something that taught them that opening their heart could eventually cost them more than keeping it closed. They brought that old fear into your connection without realizing it. You may have paid emotionally for wounds you did not create. They may have doubted your intentions because someone else once betrayed theirs. They may have expected abandonment because someone else taught them that closeness disappears without warning. They may have withdrawn whenever they felt attached because attachment once became associated with loss. None of this excuses poor communication, but it explains why certain moments felt strangely contradictory. They were not always responding to you. Sometimes they were responding to ghosts from before you. And now they are finally seeing the difference. This realization has been painful. Because when they look back honestly, they can identify moments when you were offering something sincere and they answered from fear. Moments when you were trying to understand them and they became guarded. Moments when you needed clarity and they assumed you should simply know what they could not say. That awareness has brought regret. But regret is not the final revelation. There is something larger underneath it. They are beginning to understand that you awakened the exact emotional place they had spent years trying not to touch. Not because you harmed them. Because you made them care again. And caring again meant the old wounds could no longer remain hidden. This is why the connection has felt both beautiful and difficult. You did not create every storm. Sometimes your presence simply revealed where the clouds already were. Now your soulmate has a choice. They can blame the connection for making them uncomfortable. Or they can recognize that discomfort may be inviting them to heal something they have avoided for a long time. This is where the spiritual meaning of the story deepens. Not every soulmate connection exists only to produce a romantic ending. Sometimes such connections, in stories like this, act as mirrors. They expose fears. They awaken courage. They bring hidden patterns into the light. They force two people to meet themselves more honestly. And perhaps the greatest question is not merely, will they stay? Perhaps it is, who are both of you becoming because this connection existed? Your soulmate is standing very close to answering that question. But first, they must confront the thought that has been repeating in their mind. What if I leave and later realize I was only running from something I needed to face? That question is slowing them down. The goodbye they thought would be simple has become complicated. Because now they are remembering the good. Not an idealized fantasy. Small things. The sound of your laugh. A certain expression. A conversation that stayed with them. A moment you showed kindness without making a performance of it. The way you made something difficult feel lighter. The way your presence changed the emotional temperature of a room. These memories are not shouting. They are whispering. And whispers are sometimes harder to escape. There is one memory in particular that keeps returning. A moment when you said or did something that made them feel safe. At the time, they may not have reacted strongly. But later, they understood its importance. They had been so accustomed to emotional uncertainty that genuine care almost confused them. Part of them wanted to move closer. Another part immediately searched for danger. That is when the push and pull began. They did not know how to receive something they had secretly wanted for years. And now they fear they may have pushed it too far away. This is the source of the goodbye. Not lack of feeling. Fear that the opportunity has already been damaged beyond repair. They are thinking, maybe I should leave before I discover I ruined it. But another voice is growing stronger. What if it is not ruined? That voice is becoming impossible to ignore. And soon, something may happen that makes it even louder. Because your soulmate is about to learn something they were never expecting to learn about your side of the story. Something that will challenge the entire meaning they have assigned to your silence. They have believed you stepped back because you stopped caring. They have believed your distance was an answer. They have believed your calmness meant you were untouched. But there was a reason you changed the way you showed up. There was a moment when something inside you decided that love should not require you to abandon your dignity. You may still have cared. You may still have wondered. You may still have felt the connection. But you began learning that chasing clarity from someone unwilling to provide it only creates more confusion. So you became quieter. Not empty. Quieter. There is a difference. Your soulmate may soon understand that difference. And when they do, they will realize that your silence was not necessarily the closing of a door. It may have been the moment you stopped carrying both sides of the connection. That realization will place responsibility back into their hands. No more blaming timing. No more hiding behind uncertainty. No more asking the universe to give signs while refusing to take honest action. They will have to decide. Speak or remain silent. Step forward or step away. Tell the truth or live with the unknown. And this is where the story reaches its most delicate point.